If the goal is to get younger and faster, why, in goodness gracious, are we hanging on to the opposite?
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. Today, we are continuing through the week of me as the Flames general manager. It would be quite an eventful week, and I think that that's great because we could all use a little bit of change in our lives. I don't know if I would have many fans after the first week, but it'd be the only week. So you can't run me out of town that easily. But make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. Let's jump into this because I think when it comes to becoming a younger and faster team, it sounds cut and dry, very plain and simple. Like, okay, that's easy. Let's do it. Executing the plan may not be that easy. And when you look at all of the teams in the second round of the playoffs, they all have things in common, or just amongst the teams. There is elite goaltending, elite scoring, speed, emphasis on speed, and just overall a decent mix of young players with seasoned veterans who have been in the playoffs a time or two. But with the Flames, we know that this roster is not constructed to be a Stanley Cup contender. And that might hurt some feelings, but realistically, if they were a Stanley Cup contender, they wouldn't all be on vacation or at Worlds right now. But that does not mean there's no talent on this roster. It's quite the opposite, honestly. I think that the Flames have some great pieces of talent in this lineup, and it's not just Dustin Wolf. I think that, obviously Nazem Kadri having an incredible another incredible year in Calgary and setting a new career high for goals. Jonathan Huberdeau, this season was something like we'd never seen before. And it was so nice to see, the great passes, the scoring, pretty awesome to see. And then, of course, you have Connor Zary and Matt Coronado as young players, and you bring in players like Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee who need fresh starts, and you start to see where the log jam is, and whether it's a winger or a center, and we know there's a log jam at defense too. Moves are going to have to be made in order to clear this up. And I'm not saying you have to trade every single player over 30 on your roster. I think that that's silly. I think that would not get you anywhere. But you have to take advantage of what's calling. Because I don't know where this team is in 3 years if they don't make trades. I think that they are likely going to be in the same position that they're in now. You have to take advantage of these phone calls that are coming for players that teams want, these competitive offers. We're going to talk a little bit about that next, but if it means having to take a step back, and maybe losing a piece of your leadership group, that is okay. Everyone talks about it being a business and then when a business move is made, everyone's feelings kind of get hurt. By everyone, I mean the fans. It's tough, but at the end of the day, you bounce back. And when you win a Stanley Cup or go on a deep playoff run, no one remembers. But in the dark times, everyone's going to remember. I think that the Flames have such a heavy emphasis on culture, which is great because you need a good culture. No one wants to walk into a locker room and not be excited to go to work or hate the guy that's across from them sort of situation. And I also don't think that anybody wants to coach it or be part of a team where the coach is, was only brought on because of one player. I don't think that that's a situation the Flames would find themselves in, but you need to introduce a winning culture to Calgary. Having good vibes and hard work and work ethic and things like that are all great. That is what you need, but you have to focus on bringing in the elite scoring, the younger players that are superior skaters, whether they be from your own organization or if you're trading for one. You have to work on that. And I think immediately when it comes to roster construction, that is not an easy part of the job. And I think of Sam Bennett and how to use players properly. If you're refusing to play someone at center for whatever reason, when they've expressed interest in that and have proven that they're decent at it, why wouldn't you let them kind of blossom in that position? And players playing out of position is something you want to avoid because it creates a much bigger problem than you need for it to be. I think of how the Flames drafted Connor Zary as a center and then never used him as a center until not even in the AHL. They didn't use him as a center until last season for a few games, or not this past season, but the season before after the trade deadline. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me personally, but he's shown a lot of success regardless. But you don't want to waste that opportunity, especially in a situation where you are not deep down the middle. My point being, you need to optimize every player in your roster for roster construction, winning games, but also making sure that they're to their full potential. And playing someone else in the lineup and forcing said player to be out of position, what good does that do? Is there really more good done than harm? Does that make sense? It's just a matter of shaping a roster to be a strong roster and having all the right pieces. But coming up next, we are going to talk about draft capital and potentially trading some players, because who doesn't love a little off-season drama and speculation? Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety, whether it is the regular salted or lightly salted or the salt and vinegar flavor. I am always munching on those at my desk, at work, at home, on the go, wherever you name it. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames and making the show part of your day. Make sure you're following me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jess Belmosto. So I think with this retool, transitional phase, rebuild, whatever you feel comfortable calling it, you have to remember that not all your players are going to come from trade, free agency, or your own organization. Sometimes you have to go through the draft. And Craig Conroy has made that very clear that he knows he has to have successful draft picks in order to get his superstars, because if you're not winning, you are not necessarily an attractive destination for superstars. But I think with my duty as a general manager, I would be exploring trading Blake Coleman and Nazem Kadri. I think that those are two players outside of Rasmus Anderson that I would be looking to potentially trade. Why? What makes them good candidates? Well, let's start with Blake Coleman. He has 2 years left on his deal in a 10-team trade list. And he is one of those players that is gritty, that gets down there where you need him to be, isn't afraid to throw his body around, and will definitely shoot the puck. You know, he scores fairly often. But I think that he is one of those players that is just like a chef's kiss. Like if you find out your team's acquiring him at the deadline, it's just kind of like, ooh, yes, this. I don't want to necessarily call it a full needle mover, but I do think there's a little bit of movement there. And to me, it makes a lot of sense because he is 33 years old. And you have a lot of young forwards that are going to need a shot at the NHL. Plus, you could probably get, a prospect for him, or a second or third round pick, and a second or third round pick with a prospect, because number one, it's the trade deadline. Players are going to cost you a little more, but I'm not saying like I would do it, but think about the return and what you could get for value. And that is part of the reason why I think the Flames need to capitalize on a Nazem Kadri trade. I know. I never thought I'd find myself speaking those words. I didn't necessarily see the vision at first, but when you take off the fan perspective, Nazem Kadri is playing elite level hockey at 34 years old. He still has a lot of term left on his contract, but with the cap rising at $7 million at $7 million a year for the next, let's see, till 2029, 2030, there may be a team in there that's contending that could really take advantage of that and want that. And maybe 2 first-round picks are worth that. I think your draft pile becomes a lot sweeter when you are drafting, or when you're trading players like a Nazem Kadri or a Rasmus Anderson. I think that, you're adding more, and we've talked endlessly about every draft pick having to hit. And the more draft picks you have, the less the misses hurt. And I get it. Why would you want to trade someone who is very vocal about, loving the locker room, being happy here? Well, it's a business. And at the end of the day, we're trying to win a championship. And I think that the trade tweet that he tweeted the other night about how, like, rule number 1 is you don't trade the dogs, and as a dig to the Avalanche about Mikko Rantanen, it's pretty big. And I think that you could expect one like that if the Flames were to trade him. But in order to create roster opportunities and to get better, you have to move on from certain players. Imagine if Marco Rossi is available and the Wild ask, hey, we see what Kadri's doing. What can we do there? And as far as I know, let's see, this year he does have a no movement clause for these 2 years. So 1 more year. But you can get him to potentially waive that should it be a very attractive team. And then 2026, 2027, 2028, he has a modified no trade clause, which is just a 13 no trade list. But if you can get it done, you do it, because the haul that you would get for him would be franchise altering. It would be much more than what you got for Elias Lindholm. I know that for a fact. And that should be enough to kind of have your mouth watering a little bit. Of course, it comes down to if Kadri is going to waive the no movement clause and make things slightly easier for the Flames, or no, I'm good. We can try this again next year with the 13 no team trade list. But either way, the Flames need to lock in and make some movement. There has to be something done, because number 1, you need to get younger. You need to start integrating younger players into the lineup. There's no other way to do it. Yes, I think Kadri is a fantastic player. And I'm so happy he is a Flame. But I'd also be very happy if the Flames took a step back and got to collect some nice first-round draft picks from trading him and Anderson. In my honest opinion. Like, I know that that's controversial, but at the end of the day, I want to win a championship. I want to see the cup back in Calgary. I want there to be another playoff run. And if that means making hard decisions and hurting some feelings of the fan base, maybe that's worth it. It's worked for Vegas. So why not? Worked for Tampa. You have to figure something out as a way to trade these players and get players like a Marco Rossi and maybe a Nikolai Ehlers. You don't know. I don't know. But something has to be done for this roster to take its next step forward. Whether that step forward be literally backwards in terms of standings, that's fine too, because at the end of the day, you get a better draft pick. We all want to win. But there has to be a method to your madness. And coming up next, we are going to talk about pulling punches and doing what you have to do in order to construct a Stanley Cup winning roster. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you're getting your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. And just to kind of circle back to the tough decision making, I don't think that the Flames are necessarily in the business of trading their captain away. Whether that be in the off season or like mid-season, I don't see them doing something of that nature. Do I see them trading players like Blake Coleman? Yeah, I do, because if the cards all line up, you have to do it. And they love Rasmus Andersson. That is undisputed. But this is a name that comes up a lot and has come up a lot since before the trade deadline. He is on an expiring contract going into the season. His end of season press conference certainly made it sound like he had played his last game as a Flame and is ready for the next chapter. He is beloved, and fans are going to be irate. But I hope that the return eases the pain. And, in 3 seasons, you can say, oh, wow, that first round pick turned into blah, 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 who's leading the team with 25 goals, before Christmas, or whatever, whatever the case may be. Decisions have to be made. And in terms of likability, or, where the player fits in the organization, I think back to Jacob Pelletier being traded to Philadelphia. And at first it was just Kuzmenko. And then they kept asking about Pelletier, and that meant he literally got pulled mid-game and was traded. So it does not matter how many good vibes you bring to the Flames locker room. You are potentially already on the chopping block. The Flames have to make the right decision for them. I don't want to say they don't have to care about the player they're shipping out, but at the end of the day, it's a business. You have to make those decisions. Trading a player, hypothetically, like Rasmus Andersson, is going to get you a haul. And you know what I want? A haul, so I can destroy the NHL draft, whether that be this year or next year or the year after that. I am trying to build a Stanley Cup winning team, and if I have to hurt some feelings along the way, so be it, because winning is going to feel really good. And I think that, of course, there are boundaries to what you want to do. I think, again, think back to Sam Bennett when he was going down for like his pregame meal and then found out he was scratched. I think that is something that's like a little bit unprofessional, and there's a way to trade players in the right way. You don't need to ice them out. That doesn't do anyone any good. And the player doesn't need to ice the team out if they want to trade. I think that the Flames have done a really good job with kind of like an open door policy sort of situation. Zadorov was loud and clear about not wanting to be on a stinky team. They traded him to Vancouver, had a little playoff run, and then look where he is now. But if you want out, all you have to do is say so, and the Flames will find you a new home. They have made that very clear. So we will have to keep an eye on who may be finding a new home. Because if it were up to me, there would be some roster changes already. But Marco Rossi, you are a Calgary Flame. I'm just going to keep speaking it into existence. But that'll do it for me here on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic evening or morning, afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. Enjoy your day. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Your Calgary Flames every day through the off season, and I couldn't be more excited to bring you another show tomorrow talking about the one and only razzle dazzle in the Flames defense in the long-term plan there. Until then, be safe.